You're listening to the Ink Noir podcast with your host, The Wrathful Proser.
The murder, in my opinion, was the final straw for a young girl suffering from a horrible and scary home life. She had been clashing with her mother for a while, and if you have a teenager or ever was one, you know how teen-parent disagreements can go, especially with mother-daughter ones. And in between mundane activities or imaginative fiction, Pauline recorded in her diary about her frustrations, her growing bouts of depression, her exhilarating times with Juliet, and sneaking out of the house to see Nick. And she was trying to find herself as a girl growing into a young woman. When the two girls first met in school, Pauline had come home excited that she found someone as strong-willed as she was. The friendship was once approved by both Reaper and Hume families and had even become friendly with each other. But now, as she and Juliet's friendship was growing closer, it had become a point of contention and something used by Honora to keep Pauline's behavior in check. Eventually, it created such a conflict between Honora and Pauline that I believe Juliet or Anne had told her mother Hilda about all the horrible things Pauline was telling her. And in fact, Pauline may have told Hilda some things herself, which is why during trial, Hilda compared or described these as corporal punishment. I've spent the last 3 years researching the Parker Hulme case, including looking deeper into each of the, I guess you could say, main people closely connected and related to this, especially Pauline, Juliet, and Honora. This murder took place June 22nd, 1954, in Christchurch, New Zealand. The city was proudly promoted in a 1952 travelogue film, encouraging tourists to visit the English-influenced and very conservative city. The travel film's camera sweeps over the grounds of the beautifully groomed college. The academic buildings sit as backdrops to the brightly colored Ilam gardens and weeping willow trees, lining the edges of the calm Avon River that curves through campus. This travel film was also used to open up Peter Jackson's Heavenly Creatures. Unfortunately, due to lack of money, I couldn't hop on a plane and fly to New Zealand, which I would have loved to have done. But what I did have was a slow-ass internet connection, a background in how to do research, and my ADHD hyperfocus. I searched and read through dozens and dozens of sources, such as academic papers, documentaries, legal papers, YouTube videos, nonfiction books about the case. I found web pages set up decades ago with treasure troves of information just about the Parker and Hulme's case and the movie and other media outlets, newspaper clippings, like everything you could think about, you know, the background of a movie and a real case. This guy did this, and it was one of a few old web pages that really helped to give me a wonderful chunk of information, which I then ran with in a variety of directions. More questions led to more side quests, like understanding the way life was in post-war New Zealand and looking up toxic mother-daughter relationships and how a teen's brain works chemically different than ours, just to name a few. I found myself buried in works of true crime and fiction, journals filled with notes. And after a while, I had to pause and decide how much further did I want to look at this case. My original plan was to do maybe 1 or 2 episodes on each writer that committed a crime or was involved in some way, which was my vision for this channel. And then depending on the amount of information I found, I figured I could create 1 or 2 episodes, maybe 3. But the more I uncovered in this particular case, I realized it was going to be a huge undertaking. So I had to stop and think. Was I satisfied with what I could gather with a few good Google searches and watching Heavenly Creatures once or twice? Or was I really going to step deeper into an investigative role and begin to purposely invade people's actual lives who were directly connected to this case and the people involved? I don't take this lightly. I completely understand people involved not wanting to talk about this. Most likely, they've already talked to plenty of people over time, and their voices were drowned out by the media or maybe even law enforcement. They're sick of being emotionally poked and prodded again and again, having to relive a traumatic event for the sake of the curiosity of strangers and money. They want to heal and move on without the fear of becoming triggered for the sake of a Netflix special. They also feel it ends up glorifying the killer and the crime. Others feel the only thing true crime does is exploit people for entertainment and money, and there's no real concern for the actual victims or their families. I knew I wouldn't be able to keep myself from looking deeper than I could, because in order to understand Ann Perry, who had passed away when I started to really gain interest in her case, I had to connect with the people who knew her as Ann Perry and see what a lot of people thought. I also, as a writer, wanted to read her own work to see if I can get a clearer picture of who she really was. If you write, whether it's prose or poetry or fantasy, whatever genre, you know you leave little pieces of you behind, whether you do it purposely or not. So I felt that I needed to literally read between the lines when it came to Ann Perry. Even though Pauline is still alive, there's no way really to contact her. And like Peter Jackson thought before doing Heavenly Creatures, I had to think, do I need to, should I, do I want to reach out and contact her? In reality, I would love to contact Pauline. But I understand that, first of all, it's difficult to find her. And when I did, or if I did, what would I say? How would I say it? So doing things like this, at least for me, I'm not doing this for money. Making money off of all my research and years of searching and stuff would be wonderful, but this is more to have people understand that, especially now with all the things going on in Hollywood with celebrities, that the media is not, which a lot of us know, is not always going to tell the full truth. They pick sides. And if you write something, I believe I have plenty of opinions, which I clearly say they are not fact. But you can have your opinion on a case or on a subject without having it take over and overshadow what the important pieces that you're trying to get across to people. So I really do want to try and take a more ethical view, because this is a crime that still has people alive today. There are other people who have opinions that we shouldn't talk about or cover cases until everyone involved is dead. And I do understand and agree to a certain extent, but I think the more I sit on that notion, in the case of Parker and Hulme's, I feel that would be a detriment, which is something I also think of. This is a story that needs to be told, and these two teenagers, who grew up into women, they were silenced in a way. And that doesn't take away that they were guilty and they did this. But there's also, it's not a black and white case. It's not, were they mad or bad? I reached out to people who knew Anne when she was alive. Some have responded very positively, happy to talk about their old friend. Others have asked to be left alone. When I reach out to someone, like I've said previously, I understand. I know I'm asking a lot. I know the weight of the gesture and the anger that could be thrown back at me. I'm not affiliated with anyone or any publication or media outlet. I don't have a known name in journalism that could potentially get me interviews with people. I tell people exactly who I am, what, and why I'm reaching out. I also let them know I'm very aware of my audacity in doing so. And if they say anything, it's at their convenience. And they can give as much or little as they feel they need to or want to. They can remain anonymous or just be called a source. I'd be grateful for any amount of information or opinions that they had on anything I was asking. But if they don't, I don't continue to bother them. I understand it's strange, a daring request, and trying to explain myself and what I'm doing makes me feel like a weirdo. If they tell me to fuck off, I will. I know even just opening that email with the subject line can potentially trigger them. You have to weigh the pros and cons of bringing up people's painful past for the sake of your interpretation or your version of their story involving something that happened to them. It's natural and understandable and forgivable for them to think, who the fuck is this rando trying to talk to me about either my friends or family members' horrible murder that happened to me in my life? I know not everyone is going to agree with me, and there are going to be people who don't approve of any of this, and I understand. But the reason why I am doing this is because there are two girls who have suffered immensely. And yes, one of their mothers, Honora, suffered a violent and tragic death, but it should never have occurred. And unfortunately, because it has, we're still talking about this case. But there are people who want their narrative to drown out the truth. You can feel how you want to feel about Anne and Pauline and Enora and everyone else. But you can't ignore the facts. And the facts are that these two girls were treated terribly by their parents. Juliet's parents, they do come around eventually. That doesn't negate her PTSD or anything that happened to her. And the same thing with Pauline. She had a violent mother, and maybe Enora was going through something that we don't know, that she was obviously never diagnosed with, which may have contributed to this behavior. But unfortunately, we don't have that information either. I don't think she was ever diagnosed or had gone anywhere for anything. So this is what we have. We have a woman who punishes her daughter because she was sexually assaulted by a college-aged man at 14 years old. And these are the facts that people like Peter Graham and even Anne Perry's own brother, Jonathan Hume, they are ignoring these. And they know that this stuff happened, but they're choosing not to talk about it or to brush it away as quickly as possible. And that will not stand. I will not let these two girls and their memories be tainted anymore by media sensationalism that is only here to hurt and nothing else. As you can see, I have a lot of strong feelings about this case. And it's only going to get worse because in the next episode, I'm going to introduce you to the girls' childhood illnesses. And Pauline's is a mystery. And I'm going to explain why in the next episode and part 4 of Murder in the Fourth World. Guys, thank you so much for listening and sticking through this. I really appreciate it. If you could like and subscribe, that would be awesome. Share it, pass it along. It's not just to help me and the channel, but it's also to get the word out. There are still people who are dragging these girls' names and the factual information of this case through the mud. And it's time that it stopped. So if you could share it, that would be fantastic. Again, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.